Hello, guys. Welcome back to No Muzzle Music. My name's Rob, and joining me today is, of course, Joel. How are you, Joel?
I'm not too bad, Rob. Yourself?
Yeah, lovely, lovely.
Good.
We do apologise at the slight delay in bringing this episode out. Joel's had a few throat issues, haven't you, mate?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I've been quite under the weather the last couple of weeks, so yeah, not been ideal. So we do apologise.
Are you all good now, though?
I'm absolutely firing on all cylinders, mate.
Right, we better get into it then. So
Fantastic.
this week's episode, we're talking about artists who went solo and succeeded. And what we mean by that is we don't mean people who sort of went off and formed another band with someone or have started doing collabs with people. This is they were in a band and they've gone to do their own thing, marketed under their name, essentially. And
Hmm.
obviously they're going to have help from outside sources and whatnot. But if it's sort of branded as their solo venture, then yeah. And in terms of success, it's just I think things we think are pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
What we're
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
for.
I think yeah. Ideally, maybe a slight balance between a bit of commercial success and it actually being something that sounds really good, and then obviously alternatively sometimes these things go slightly under the radar, so they might not have the same commercial success, but nonetheless, they're great records and a
Yeah.
great career.
So, with that criteria in mind, what immediately jumps to your mind, Joel?
So someone that jumps to my mind straight away is Syd Barrett, definitely. And if for those of you that don't know, Syd was the he was the frontman of Pink Floyd and the guitarist and one of the founding members. Unfortunately, I think unfortunately for Pink Floyd, he was only around for the first album, which in my opinion is the best Pink Floyd album that they've ever done. I think unfortunately they've not really been able to follow it since, because the sort of fun energy that Sid brought to the band. I think he carried on with his solo career afterwards. I think he was quite a difficult person to work with, hence the reason that they kind of had to shift him off to the side. But the record label obviously saw talent in him because they wanted to hang on to him so he could release solo material. Um, and he had a little bit of a hiatus, so he left the band in the late '60s, and his first solo album, The Madcap Laughs, didn't come out until 1970. And although the commercial success was minimal, with Syd, he kind of has that sort of crazy genius air about him, and that it translated really well to everything he's done in his solo career, to be honest. And I think one thing I will say as well is slightly controversial this, but as great as stuff like Animals and Dark Side of the Moon are, to me it kind of feels like when Syd left, a part of Pink Floyd died. I mean, although they've gone on to be one of the biggest bands of all time, and that first album's not one that people talk about that often. Um, yeah, I just think the light went out slightly, but that's my opinion.
So, personally, I'm not too familiar with Sid's solo work. In terms of, is it quite? Has he sort of carried on from where he left with Pink Floyd with it, or did he go in a completely new direction? Or
So it's got the same kind of feel about it, that sort of fun, clever, sort of almost comical kind of style. And yeah, I think just there weren't as many restraints when he went solo. I think he was quite a difficult person to work with and a bit of an eccentric. I think, to be honest, he like I said, he's got that sort of crazy genius, sort of mad air about him. And I think that when you're like that, it can make it quite difficult to work in a band. Really, I think because
yeah,
you yeah,
there's obviously a lot of it's quite famous for his mental health issues and things. So
yeah,
that it always has the potential to provide a bit of tension in,
definitely.
especially in a sort of creative space. That while it may lead to sort of your inspiration, it also can affect the actual day-to-day working, which is
I
quite a problem,
I
really.
think so. Yeah, I think so. And again, that's why I think they had to shift him out. I mean, I don't know whether they really wanted to on a musical level, but I think he was becoming quite difficult to work with. And I think when that happens, you are better off just going solo because you can do your own thing and you're not really tied down. And also, you're not you're not pissing off other people.
Yeah, there's no real constraints with
No,
it. You
no,
sort of have a bit more license. Where I suppose if you've got this unbridled creative energy,
yeah,
then the last thing you want is someone sticking their nose in and going, "Oh, well, how about we do this instead?"
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I do think it's quite interesting that obviously there are similarities because it the solo projects for me seem to go one of two ways. They either carry on sounding exactly like what the band sounded like,
Mm,
but with a bit of embellishment or something, which is how I view Jack White's solo stuff. It's not too far removed from the White Stripes. It's
no,
just a bit
it's
more.
not, is it?
There's a bit more sort of different textures, and there's a bit more indulgent, perhaps. And then you can take it the complete opposite direction, which perhaps an Iggy Pop did.
Mm,
We sort of look at the Stooges' work, and this big fiery, aggressive rock and roll sort of thing, and then obviously Iggy did. He just went wherever he wanted after he left.
yeah,
He
did
sort of
his
did a
own thing.
bit of new wave, a bit of post punk, and yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like it. I mean, it goes without saying that one of the main benefits of going solo is that you can just sort of follow the wind.
yeah, and I'd say quite a lot of the time as well. It's when you're sort of making it with your band, if you like, you tend to be quite young and not particularly experienced with the industry, and maybe writing music in a sort of commercial way. If you see, I don't mean that in terms of like making a song to actually sort of sell and sacrificing all the creativity. I kind of mean that in a way of of actually having a record deal where you need to have 3 albums out in a set amount of time and writing something that you're happy with in that time frame is kind of what I mean. And I think once a lot of these artists go solo, they've got a hell of a lot more experience under their belt. I think that's the case for a lot of people. They've
Hmm.
done it. They've toured. They've worked with a lot of different people within the industry, and I think it's kind of a time of using all that wealth of experience and just doing your own thing, like you said, without any constraints from other band
And
members.
I suppose you do have or you're more likely to have the sort of gravitas to be able to put your foot down and say this is what, like, if you've sort of established yourself
Yeah,
in a band.
you can feel like you can talk with authority,
Yeah, I agree.
definitely. Which again, I mean that can backfire massively, massively. Which will save for the video of solo people that have gone solo and it hasn't worked out.
Yeah, there'll be
But
a part two to
but
this at some point,
but
which will
yeah, I
be a
think
fun one, I think.
definitely, definitely. And I guess another person that another artist that definitely kind of carried on in a similar vein, although the music was slightly different, is Morrissey. I mean, as the leader of the Smiths and arguably one of the most important people in British music during the 80s, and coinciding with a character like he has, it was kind of inevitable for him to do a solo career when the Smiths came to an end. It was always going to happen, and I think although although all of his solo stuff it just isn't the same without that jangly Johnny Marr guitar, and it never will be. But I think that's not a bad thing because all good things come to an end, and you don't want too much of a good thing. So yeah, it's a little bit different, slightly more theatrical in the production. But yeah, I mean, he's just churned out album after album over the years and made a really successful solo career for himself.
Yeah, I think especially with someone like Morrissey who has such a signature songwriting style and such a signature
Yeah,
vocal delivery, there's there's not that much wiggle room, I don't think.
no,
I,
I'd
I,
agree
I
with you
don't
on
know
that.
how it would really work out if he came out and did some free jazz or some hardcore punk or anything. I don't think it'd really, like, he's very good at what he does, and he's got his little
Yeah,
space. And whether it's with the Smiths or on his own, he's sort of in that space where his talents sort of fit in.
yeah. No, I'd agree with that. I think he could have gone and done something random, but it probably wouldn't have worked out. And I think he wouldn't have wanted to do that to himself. I don't think. So. Yeah, and I mean, he did he did things a bit different before the Smiths. He was in a couple of different bands like the Nosebleeds and stuff, where it was a little bit more post punk than the Smiths. But I mean, I think that was just a time period thing, to be honest. And he was young, so I mean, it takes you a while to, if you're going to develop a distinctive style like that. I
You've got
think
to find your voice, haven't you?
exactly. You've
That's
got,
not
yeah,
something you
exactly.
just wake up with.
No, you've got it from within you. You've just got to sort of put it out, really, haven't you? But I mean, I'd class Morrissey as definitely been a successful solo artist, because I mean, he was cross-examined by Scotland Yard over the over the song "Margaret on the Guillotine" due to the fact they thought he was plotting to kill Thatcher. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
political views aside, there's definitely a place for Morrissey in the
I'd
solo
class that as a
pantheon.
success, if I'm honest, Rob. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie. Why not? Why not?
yeah. And I think another interesting thing for when an artist does go solo is how they try and sort of shed the skin of their previous band.
Mm.
Because some people just do it as a passion project, and that it's not really for any sort of um it's just an artistic exploration more than
Tom
anything
York's a
else.
perfect example of that.
Yeah, yeah. And you find it with a lot of singers. They just go
Yeah.
and do an album here and there, like James Dean Bradfield from the Manics. Or
Building upon what's already there, really, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. And then there's the sort of the other side where you step out and you become as big as the band
Bigger,
you came from, if
sometimes.
not bigger. And that's what I think happened to Lou Reed. I mean, it's quite the task to become bigger than one of the sort of most acclaimed underground bands of all time. But
Yeah,
I think Lou did that. I
I'd say
think,
so, definitely. I think so. I think people think of Lou Reed before they think of Velvet Underground.
yeah, definitely. I
But
mean, and just in terms of his body of work, I'm sure yourself and me could talk about Transformer in particular for hours on
oh
end.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that was the thing that sort of gave him his mainstream break, really.
mm.
We sort of had the radio play and whatnot, and I think really he pushed the boundaries quite a lot as well. And I mean, obviously, Metal Machine Music comes to
Yeah.
mind.
There's a hell of a lot of
Yes.
conspiracies as to
Yeah.
why that album was put out. But
Well, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, even himself said he's gone on record saying on the one hand that it was a completely intentional artistic endeavor, and then the next minute he says, "If you get to side four, you're smarter than I am." I think,
exactly.
regardless, it's still a ridiculously influential piece of
It
work.
is. I mean, I quite like the idea that he put it out to get out of his record contract, to be honest. And I kind of like to think that was true, because
If that is the case, then it makes the aftermath of it even more extraordinary.
I think another thing with Velvet Underground as well is that they weren't that big at the time. I mean, that first album only sold 30,000 copies.
Yeah, well,
Although
that's the same as the Stooges at the time. They weren't
no, not really. And I think
particularly successful.
it kind of paved the way for Lou to go on and just spread his wings, I think, and really take the industry by storm. I think because of how influential Velvet Underground were, because Brian Eno's on record as saying that although there was only a couple of tens of thousands of people that bought the record, every single one of them started a band.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's something to take note of, because the foundations were definitely there. I just think if they were bigger at the time, maybe Lou's solo career would have been slightly different.
Actually, you make a sort of continue on the theme of the artist sort of pushing on from their band. You bring up Brian Eno, who's a
Yeah,
A
yeah.
classic example of just completely going left field and sort of finding his voice in that, with all the sort of ambient stuff that he's done, like
Oh
music
yeah,
for airports
music for
and the
airports. I
like.
love.
Yeah,
Absolutely brilliant. That is proper chill, chill music. But yeah, I think one thing with Eno though is that he went on to do some really experimental stuff that he wouldn't have got away with at Roxy Music. I mean, just would never have happened. I think one thing that Brian Eno did do, certainly after his solo career, post Roxy Music, is he definitely inspired a generation of artists with the work that he was putting out, and in a way that's quite similar to Lauryn Hill. I mean, after the Fugees disbanded in '97, it kind of paved the way for her to secure a place in hip hop and R&B royalty, really. And
yeah,
her
definitely.
yeah, and her 1998 record, "The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill," definitely did this. There's no two ways about that. I mean, it became one of the most critically acclaimed albums of the year, and it broke the record for the highest sales in the first week for a female artist. So that's the kind of
Yeah,
grand scale of
it,
grandeur we're talking
it's
about.
Miseducation is one of the great solo albums, I think,
100%.
and it sort of transcended Lauren from the Fugees,
Yeah.
and because no, like it's like with Lou Reed, no one thinks about the Fugees anymore.
No.
It's
She became an icon in her own right.
yes, definitely,
And I
definitely.
think, although on one hand you can say that she only did one full length album, um, but I mean that's all the Sex Pistols needed. They only
Yeah,
needed one album.
yeah. If that's what you're going to do and then quit while you're ahead, there's
Exactly.
absolutely no shame in
I
that.
think if you make enough impact with one album, you don't need to do another.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you don't want to, you don't need to. And I think that's definitely the case for her, 100%.
Uh,
And she did go on to inspire a generation of hip hop artists, both male and female. Well, the way that she blended the rap and the melodic singing in such a cohesive, effortless sort of way, it you so many people that came after her were reared on Lauryn Hill, and that's evident.
I see. You've got a bit of solo artist paraphernalia going on there, Joe. I see the Morrissey picture in the background, and
Oh, good grief!
who's that on your shirt? May I just ask?
The one and only Mr. Rod
Oh,
Stewart.
the
Mr. Rod
big man
Stewart.
himself.
Where do you start? Where do you start with Rod? I think for me, the biggest disappointment with Rod Stewart is the fact that he's always sung relatively mediocre songs. There are some great numbers out there. Don't get me wrong, but on the whole, the songs that he's been singing, I just think could have been stronger for a guy that's got a voice as good as that. I mean,
Yeah, a man that talented,
his
sort of
voice
singing
is
wise.
exceptional, absolutely exceptional, and I just kind of wish
Well, no other
he was
really.
featuring on some slightly better tracks, really. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm looking for something that Rod's not about. But nonetheless, I'm a huge Rod Stewart fan. Let
Yeah,
that be known.
as we can tell.
Let that be
And
known.
and I think that just about wraps it up for this week. It's a nice quick one for you. And now you guys can get in touch. What do you think of our analysis on successful solo acts? Do you enjoy these guys? Who do you think has gone on sort of from a band to do their own thing that you think is really good? You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at nomuzzlemusic for both. And we also have a Spotify account of the same name, of which we will be making a playlist of our favorite solo artists. That'll be just down below in the description. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, give us a like, show your mates. It all helps us out. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Lovely.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Joel.
Thank you.